If you had $500,000 invested in index funds and you stopped contributing forever, you would still hit $1 million in roughly 11 years. That means stopping halfway to a million only delays the finish line by about 3 years compared to someone who kept investing the entire time. The gap between halfway in dollars and halfway in time is one of the most useful ideas in personal finance, and the retirement industry has zero incentive to explain it to you because they make more money when you feel behind. I'm going to show you the exact moment when your money starts doing more work than you do, how to calculate the number where retirement works even if you never invest another dollar, and why reaching that number changes everything about how you think about your career and your life. Think of it like starting a job where you have a coworker. On day one, you're doing everything. You're carrying the entire project while your coworker sits in the corner, barely producing anything useful. A few small tasks here, maybe a couple minor contributions there. Not enough to notice and definitely not enough to rely on. But this coworker gets better every single month and they never stop improving. At some point, they're pulling equal weight with you, and then one day you look up and realize they're outproducing you 3 to 1 while you haven't changed at all. That coworker is compounding. And the moment they start doing more work than you is called the crossover point, and it changes the entire psychology of building wealth. The math behind it is simple enough to sketch on a napkin. Say you're investing $20,000 a year into a broad index fund, and we assume a long-run average return of 7% to keep the numbers clean. When your portfolio reaches $100,000, 7% growth produces about $7,000 a year, while your contribution is $20,000, so you're still clearly doing 3 times the work of your coworker. But when the portfolio climbs to $300,000, 7% growth produces $21,000, which means your coworker just matched your output for the first time. You and compounding are now pulling equal weight. And by 500,000, 7% growth is $35,000 a year, while your contribution is still sitting at $20,000. So now your coworker is the dominant producer and your savings, while helpful, have become the smaller contribution. Push it further to a million and 7% growth is $70,000 a year, which means the portfolio just generated more than most American households earn in salary, all while you contributed the same $20,000 you always did. That shift is why people who've been investing for a decade describe a moment where something clicked around the $300,000 to $500,000 range. It's not just that the account is bigger, it's that the math physically feels different when you watch your portfolio grow by more in a single quarter than you contributed all year. Your relationship to the account changes from "I'm building this" to "this thing is building itself." But knowing the crossover point exists creates a dangerous question, and it's the one everyone secretly wonders, but nobody asks out loud because it sounds irresponsible. What happens if I just stop contributing at different points along the way? Not stop forever necessarily, but what if life forces a pause? Or what if you just want to know how much damage stopping would actually do? Let's run the experiment with the same assumptions. 20,000 a year, 7% average growth, aiming for $1 million. If you invest the whole way through without stopping, you reach a million in roughly 23 years. That's the baseline drawn on the left side of the whiteboard. Now let's draw 3 alternate timelines next to it and see what the damage actually looks like. Timeline 1. You stop contributing at $100,000, which might take about 5 years of disciplined saving to reach. From there, compounding alone needs decades to carry the remaining distance because the portfolio doesn't have enough mass yet. 7% of 100,000 is $7,000 a year, and trying to grow $900,000 at that rate is like filling a swimming pool with a garden hose. You eventually get to a million, but you've added an enormous delay because you walked away before your coworker was strong enough to handle the project alone, and the momentum was barely there to coast on. Timeline 2. You stop at 300,000, roughly 11 years of contributions. Compounding can carry the remaining 700,000 in about 18 more years because it's now producing real growth on a meaningful base. You land at the finish line around year 29. That's only 6 years slower than someone who never stopped, and you just bought yourself 18 years of not having to save. Timeline 3 is the one that breaks how you think about this. You stop at 500,000 after about 15 years of contributing, and compounding doubles it to 1 million in roughly 11 more years, putting you at year 26 total, 3 years slower than the person who invested non-stop for 23 straight years. Sit with that for a second. You saved diligently for 15 years, then completely stopped for 11 years, took your foot entirely off the gas, and the total cost was 3 years. That's the power of critical mass, because compounding accelerates as the base grows, and the final doubling happens faster than the first one did. So, the crossover point isn't just a nice concept on a chart. It fundamentally changes the math between effort and outcome, and somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000, your coworker becomes productive enough to carry the project, whether you show up or not. But there's a trap hiding inside this idea, and it catches people who get excited about the crossover point without thinking one step further. Compounding overtaking your contributions does not mean you can quit investing and retire tomorrow. The crossover point tells you when the portfolio grows faster than you save, but it says nothing about whether the portfolio is large enough to actually live on. A $500,000 portfolio growing at 7% produces $35,000 a year, and if you need $70,000 to cover your life, you're still short by half. The crossover point is about momentum and psychology. The question of when you can actually stop investing and still retire on schedule is a completely different calculation, and it has a specific name. Financial independence writers call it COAST-FI, and it answers one focused question. How much do I need invested right now so that even if I never add another dollar, compounding alone will grow it into my full retirement number by my target age? Not early retirement necessarily, just regular, scheduled, on-time retirement that no longer depends on you being perfectly disciplined with contributions for the next 20 or 30 years. Let's build it step by step using numbers you could work through on the back of a grocery receipt. Start with how much you want to spend in retirement. Let's say $70,000 a year. Subtract income you expect from sources that don't require selling investments, like Social Security, and estimate that at $25,000. That leaves $45,000 a year your portfolio needs to generate on its own. A widely used withdrawal framework suggests dividing that annual need by 0.04, which gives you a target portfolio of roughly $1,125,000. Write that number on the right side of the receipt because that's the finish line. Now comes the part that changes how all of this feels. To find your coast number, you take that finish line and discount it backward using the time you have left. If you're 30 years from retirement and you assume a conservative 5% real return after inflation, you divide 1,125,000 by 1.05 raised to the 30th power. A financial planner working through that on a calculator lands on roughly $260,000. That means a 30-year-old sitting on about $260,000 in index funds today could theoretically stop contributing entirely and still watch compounding deliver the full retirement number on schedule. Not because markets are guaranteed to return exactly 5% every year, but because 30 years of even modest real growth does enormous work on a 6-figure base. The math bends time in your favor when you give it enough runway, but COAST-FI comes with a warning label that the online calculators leave out, and ignoring it can wreck the whole plan. The number assumes you stay invested through every crash, every correction, and every panic headline that makes you want to sell everything and hide in cash. A 32-year-old who hits their coast number and then panic sells 40% of their portfolio during the next bear market at 35 just reset the clock by years. Coast FI is not a guarantee. It's a conditional contract between you and your own behavior, and the condition is that you leave the account alone for decades no matter what the market does. The other risk is lifestyle inflation, and it's sneakier than panic selling because it happens gradually. If hitting your coast number convinces you to upgrade your apartment, lease a nicer car, and eat out 4 nights a week instead of 2, you might add $20,000 a year in spending without even noticing. That quietly moves the finish line further out and the math breaks without anyone sounding an alarm. The freedom Coast FI offers is real, but it only survives if you protect what you've built by keeping your spending roughly where it was when you did the calculation. So, what does Coast FI actually buy you in practice if it's not early retirement? It buys optionality, and optionality might be the most underrated form of wealth because it changes the math on every decision you make from that point forward. It means your career decisions stop being controlled by a retirement countdown clock ticking in the background of every conversation with your boss. You could take the lower-paying job that doesn't destroy your Sunday nights because the salary difference no longer threatens your future. You could start a small business knowing that even if it fails completely, your retirement isn't collateral damage sitting in the blast radius. You could work 3 days a week and spend the other 4 raising your kids or building something you actually care about without the nagging guilt that you're falling behind a savings schedule. A friend of mine hit her coast number at 38 and switched from corporate law to teaching high school history, which cut her income by 60% but gave her back her evenings and weekends. Her retirement projections didn't change at all because the portfolio was already large enough to finish the job on its own. Coast FI doesn't eliminate the need to earn income for your daily expenses. It eliminates the fear that one bad career move or one unexpected layoff permanently damages your future, and that fear is the invisible weight most working people carry every single day without realizing it. And the distance between where you are right now and that kind of freedom is probably shorter than you think, which brings us to the milestones actually worth tracking, because they're the ones that tell you your coworker is getting stronger. The first $10,000 proves the savings habit is real, and it feels painfully slow because compounding is barely producing enough to buy a nice dinner once a month. But that 10,000 matters more than any deposit after it because it proves you can do the hard part, which is starting. The first 100,000 is the hardest grind in all of personal finance because you're doing 90% of the work while your portfolio contributes almost nothing. And Charlie Munger once said, the first 100,000 is the hardest thing to get, and he wasn't exaggerating. But once you clear it, the next 100,000 comes noticeably faster because compounding is now producing real numbers, and the one after that comes even faster because the snowball has actual mass. The crossover point, wherever it falls for your specific savings rate, is the moment you feel the boulder start rolling downhill instead of uphill, and the entire emotional experience of investing flips from exhausting to exciting. Your Coast FI number is where the pressure lifts, and your contributions shift from necessary to optional, which is when career decisions start feeling like real choices instead of financial obligations you can't escape. And the moment your annual investment returns exceed your annual salary is genuinely one of the strangest experiences in personal finance because your money earned more, sitting in an account doing nothing, than you earned showing up to an office and working every single day for an entire year. Your investing journey is not one long grind stretched evenly across 4 decades where every year feels the same. It's a series of gear shifts where the effort required drops and the output accelerates. And the earlier you identify which gear you're currently in, the easier it becomes to keep going when the monthly contributions feel pointlessly small compared to what the portfolio does on its own. Early on, you're doing all the work and your coworker is barely showing up, contributing so little you wonder why they're even there. Then, somewhere around that 300,000 mark, they start matching your output dollar for dollar, and the load finally feels shared. Then, one day they're doing more than you are, and you realize your role has quietly shifted from carrying the project to just not getting in the way. And eventually, if you stay in the game long enough and resist the urge to interfere every time the market drops, your coworker doesn't need you at the desk anymore, and the only thing left for you to do is let them work. If this helped you see where you stand, subscribe.